elders, the people I held in such high esteem, all mixed together in one massive mess. But while I have love and respect for all of those involved, I had to determine how God was leading me. At that time, I was warned that I needed to get out of Willow right away because the elders could not be trusted and because there was a massive cover-up going on. I faced the same anger, confusion, and disbelief that many of you have experienced as you heard about this issue. But as I delved into the details with people on all different sides of this, what I found to be true couldn't have been farther from what was said. I am here today because God has given me peace and confidence in our elders, in the thorough and extensive work that they have done to lead and protect our church. I stand here today because I know that there are fallen human beings on all sides of this, and I believe that God has grace for all of us. Most of all, I am here today because God has given me great confidence in the future of our church. This church has always only ever been about Him, and I know that He is going to carry us through this.
When I was 20, I was a sophomore at Hope International University. It was a Bible college in Fullerton, California. I was studying Greek. I was taking preaching classes. I was studying the life of Christ. And I don't think I could have ever imagined, almost 20 years later, having two of my preaching heroes at odds. Reading about it, learning about it. And I imagine for some of you, you were like me. How do you make sense of all this? Is one side right? Is the other side wrong? Many of you in this room, I know, both Bill and J.O. have been profound spiritual fathers to you. Nancy Beach, Nancy Orper, incredible communicators teaching you. And you know, I think for many of you, you might be like me going, what happened? What's going on? And what I want you to know is there is going to be an urge to choose a side, to get protective. But I want to remind you what Bill has taught us, what Bill has taught me. And it's the power of the dual narrative. It's about listening to both sides. It's about hearing. It's about respecting both. And for me, that has been my pathway through this. Being able to lean into Christ. Being able to listen. Being able to learn. And there is a range of emotions, but I want to tell you tonight, I want to just give you a map of what we're going to do. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to get a chance to hear from our elders some facts, a little bit of the process for them. We're going to have a time where we get to ask some questions of Bill and Rob and Pam, and we're going to learn a little bit about some lessons that they've learned. But tonight is an important night, and I'm so grateful that you're here.
As Steve said, tonight is not about taking sides. And while we've been navigating this issue, I've repeatedly heard Bill and the elders say, how do we take a high road in this? So tonight you are not going to experience any bashing of people. We as a church are committed to respect everyone always. And I want to make that our ground rule for tonight, that we will respect everyone always. Out of respect, I want to ask you not to interrupt, not to cheer or boo or throw tomatoes or give a standing ovation or shout out your thoughts. There are people here who are experiencing a wide range of emotions or thoughts, and we want to respect that and give space for that. While we have called this a family meeting, we also know that there are some members of the media that are here in this room, and we want to let you know that you are welcome here as well. As we jump into this, I want to ask that no one here records anything from this night. This is about us being present in the room together.
She protects women. Single moms in our community, Fellowship Housing does this amazing job to just bring them in, give them a place to live, help them. And she is an unbelievable leader. And one of the things I respect most about Pam, and I've learned from her, is just her quiet resolve to wait on the Lord. And there's been moments that I've seen in the last 6 months where she's just jumped to verses, she's just jumped to prayer, and it's been an absolute gift to me. Rob, on the other hand, is an Ohio State fan. Okay? So I am going to discern. Yes. But Rob, I have to tell you, he was kind of CGO, he was like the chairman of the elder board for a season, and you'll hear a little bit more of that. But he was in the business world. And he works in employment, legal, HR world at a massive publicly traded firm in the Chicago area. He served on our board and then is now probably about a year and a half ago took over Willow, Chicago and is the lead pastor there. He's an amazing pastor and husband and friend. So why don't you two share? Oh, and the guy on the far right, I love him. That's Bill Hybels. So, Pam, why don't we start with you? I'm going to share about it.
Okay. This has been so hard. This place has been my church home for almost 30 years. I've grown as a Christ follower, not only under Bill's teaching, but also under John's teaching. And Nancy's teaching as well. I owe each one of these individuals a debt of gratitude all along my spiritual journey. There's such tension inside of us as we consider each person in this story. Never did I imagine I would be sitting up here having this conversation with all of you. I'm guessing that's what some of you are feeling now. We all love these people. So I wanted to begin by letting you know I understand what some of you may be feeling. The other thing I want you to know is that I stand up here representing our full elder board who are all here in the room tonight. The role of the elders is to protect our church. And I want you to know we feel the full weight of that responsibility, and we take it very seriously. And finally, I hope that tonight we can bring some clarity to a very complicated and confusing situation.
As Steve mentioned, I had the privilege of serving on the elder board from 2012 to 2016. My wife Tammy and I and our family have been part of Willow since 1995, so we've been here a while. And as Pam mentioned, it was a privilege to serve with the elders because they take their responsibility so seriously. And you're probably aware, every year elders roll off and new elders come on. So the board changes every year. And to see how God raises up men and women to serve as stewards and overseers of our church is just a blessing. And I think the power of the elder board, and you're going to hear more about it tonight, is that they work as a group. And so it was a privilege to serve, but as Pam mentioned, this has been a difficult season. It was a difficult season for the elders. It was a difficult season for me. But again, God has been faithful, and we ask Him to guide us along the way, and we believe He led us. So.
I want to thank all of you for coming. There's so many places that you'd probably rather be than at a family meeting at Willow tonight, but it means a lot to me that you would come. My major emotion right now is sadness. I have always prided myself at being able to build and sustain relationships over a long period of time. The 4 people who helped me start Willow are still with me and serve on staff at Willow. We've done ministry together, for more than 40 years. I love long-term relationships, and the fact that some of these people that you've been reading about, we're not in good relationship right now, and that's very sad to me. I worked with some of these folks for decades, and they felt like family, like relatives to me. And through the situation that we'll be describing to you, we wound up on different sides of issues, seeing truth a different way. And this got so complicated, we wound up not being able to get on the same page. And that's very saddening to me. I also want to say that the elders who have been working with this for 4 years are some of the most committed, mature, hardworking people. They all have busy lives and families, and they've put themselves into this to really understand and to try to help navigate through this very difficult matter. Final thing I want to say is I've spent my whole life trying to empower women and trying to make sure that their full giftedness is expressed in the church and in the world and so. And the very fact that a couple women, dating back 20 years, say that my actions or words offended them is hard for me to hear, because that's never been my MO. That's never been the intent of my heart in any way. Some of the accusations you heard about in the trib are just flat out lies. And I've never had that happen to me in this kind of fashion before. And so I'm grieving that. And I'm eager for you to hear the whole story so that you can come to a better understanding.
So we're going to go ahead and get into the story now. You are doing a really great job emailing in questions. We've got a full slew of those already. I know a number of these are going to be addressed just even as we go through this. As we were trying to figure out how to help communicate what, again, is a very complicated story, we thought the timeline of this will actually help navigate through. So we want to start back in April 2014. Kind of the first season of time was April 2014 to January 2015. Rob, you were chair of the elder board at that time. Can you tell us what happened in that season?
Sure. So I was processing into becoming the chief governance officer, the chair. On April 1st of 2014, Jim and Leanne Miato met with one of our elders and said that a former employee at Willow had told Leanne that she had been engaged in a relationship, an inappropriate relationship with Bill. We met as a board 2 days later, on April 3rd. We met off-site. We met as a board without Bill being present, right? We needed to process what we were going to do as a board. And we met for about 3 hours, and what I want to try to convey is I'm going to hit some of these dates. They're going to come fairly rapid, but one of the beauties, I think, of our elder board is that we don't make a step unless everybody's in full agreement. So this first meeting, we're hearing the allegations and we're discerning lots of conversation, lots of prayer as to what is the next best step for us to take. And the elder board discerned that the next best step to take was to try and talk to the individual who had made the allegation. We did not know her name. So we asked the elder who had first heard the story to go back to Leanne and ask Leanne to ask that person if they would meet with the elder board so we could hear from her directly. What we received on April 4th was an email from that individual to Leanne, which she then forwarded to us, in which she said, I'm not going to meet with the elders. You have no basis to go to the elders. And as far as you know, this could all be made up. And but at that point, we had her name, right? Because it was on the email that was forwarded to us. So we met again as an elder board, again off-site without Bill, because as you might expect, as we're doing the investigation, as an elder board of Bill, he's not going to be involved in that process. And so everything I described in terms of the steps we took as an elder board, Bill was not involved in that process. We were doing this as independent board members. And even when we heard that, the other thing I want to impress upon you is when we were hearing these allegations for the first time on April 3rd, one of the things I'm really proud of our elder board was we kept reminding ourselves we're not going to make a rush to judgment, one way or the other, that we're going to see where the information takes us. And then that's when we decided the best next step would be to actually speak to the individual, so we made that effort. And we see the email, we meet again on April 6th. Get off-site as a board, we pray, what is the next best step? And we discern, well, we're going to talk to Bill. So 2 of our elders met with Bill on a Sunday morning after service, confronted him with these allegations. And they met with about 20 to 25 minutes. Bill denied it. He acknowledged that this was a person, a friend of the family, was a friend of his, that they had worked with Willow, but absolutely denied that anything inappropriate had happened. And those 2 elders came back and reported to our full board as to the nature of the conversation. So we took that information and discerned we would still want to reach out to the individual who had made the allegation. So we asked Pam, because we now knew the name of the person, to reach out to her. And on that same day, on the 6th, Pam was able to reach her by telephone. And in that conversation, the person said, I know what you're calling me about. I think there's been a misunderstanding. And Pam kept asking, we'd like to meet with you. We'd like to hear your story. And she said, well, there's just no validity to any of it. And I'm not going to meet with you. So Pam reported that back to the full elder board. That evening, again on April 6th, Leanne forwarded to us an email that she had received from this individual, a very lengthy email, which explains to Leanne that what she had told Leanne was a lie. And I think Pam's going to read that now.
Leanne, I never thought that the conversation with you would go to this extreme. The reason I have been so resistant about all of this is because I did not tell you the whole truth. Now that you have brought it to this level, I have to confess before it goes any further. And I don't want anybody to get in trouble, but I also don't want you to be fooled anymore. Some of what I told you happened, the insinuations, the flirting, but there is no truth to the other things. Bill and I have been friends, and I liked the attention I got from him and being his friend. But the day you and I talked was after a time I was so frustrated with Willow and Bill, especially after we had dedicated our whole lives to the church and having never been given any credit whatsoever. Bill had given a message about something having to do with that, and I was so angry with Bill. Anyway, you know my frustration there already, but it just hit a chord in me. And that is why I asked you that day you came to my house about your relationship with Bill, and then started down the path of making bad things up about him, especially when you were so serious about it the next day. I wanted to get back at Willow and Bill for being such a jerk to me and our family after all the time we've been friends, and after all we gave to the church. And you made it easy, because I did not really have to say anything that day at the house, so it didn't feel like I was lying. I just nodded and cried, and you have to know my tears were real tears of so much rage and hate and anger and frustration toward him. I was angry with Willow. You know I can't even stand going to church. And I figured that with your sympathy I could tear him down and Willow down and get it out of my system. But then when you believed me, I felt bad, and I didn't know how to go back on my words without hurting you or without you being angry with me. And then you got Jimmy involved, and I felt even worse. I was going to tell you that day when I went to the hotel, but then Jimmy was there and I wondered what he would think of me, and I told you both that I was making things up. You might have sensed my hesitation at a few points because I sincerely wanted to tell you, but when you were both trying to be my friend about the whole thing, I figured I would be much safer not to say anything, and that I could just let the whole thing drop without you figuring out that I wasn't telling the truth. I am so sorry, Leanne, about getting you involved, about lying to you and Jimmy. It seemed like a good idea at the time because I was not thinking straight. Now it has gotten totally out of hand. I knew you would be angry at Bill too and sympathize with me because of your own situation with Willow, and I am so sorry I took advantage of that. I have been praying like crazy to know how to rectify this situation. I thought by asking you to drop it, that you eventually would without me having to tell you the truth. It played out a little too well though, and now I have to tell everyone that I am basically a liar, which I guess I am. I lied to you and I am so sorry. I lied to Jimmy and I am so sorry. I just needed to feel like I had power over Bill, and that is a way that I could blame him and make myself look good in the process. I just never thought you'd do anything. I got a call from one of the elders today and told them there was no allegation or accusation, that I had told you some things that might have been misconstrued and that it had gotten beyond what it should have. I should have come right out and said I lied, but it was harder than I thought to try to say it. I am not sure if Bill has been told yet. I have not heard anything, which may be a good thing, but right now I don't really care what anybody thinks of me. I just want to stop having to lie to cover more lies. I should have never let it go this far, but I was justifying it all in my head. I love you and Jimmy and did not know how to tell you what I said was all just messed up in my own head. Please forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I hope you can at least try to understand that was never my intention. One lie just built on another, and then I had to convince myself that it was all justified anyway. I also did not figure you would be so kind to me about it, which made it so hard to tell you. And you were so angry too, which made me feel somehow even more justified. I am so sorry. Again, I hope you can forgive me.
So we received that email, and like I said, Pam had the conversation with her in which she said there was no validity to it. We received the written email in which she explains that it was a lie and even explains why she did it. We continued over the next several days to again try to arrange for a meeting with her, but she would not meet with us. And there was an exchange of emails between her and Pam in which again she apologized for not telling the truth from the beginning. One thing I should also mention is, even though, as Steve mentioned, my background it was labor and employment law, and then I worked as chief HR officer for a Fortune 500 company for a number of years, so I had personally had experience with respect to investigations. We also had another lawyer on the board at the time who had done workplace investigations, but we also retained an outside attorney to counsel us during this period of time. We didn't ask the attorney to actually do the investigation, but she did provide us counsel along the way, because again, we wanted to make sure we were doing a thorough investigation into these matters because we knew the import of that to the church. On April 10th, we actually had a full board meeting, and so we had the opportunity as a board to discuss this matter with Bill. So everybody on the board had the opportunity to hear from him, to ask him questions. I imagine that was probably not your favorite board meeting, but it was an opportunity for us to fully ask him about the allegations that had been made. Other steps that the board took is we hired an IT forensic consulting firm to do a search of Bill's devices. So we searched for emails, we looked at his financial records, we looked at travel records. And as I said before, Bill was not engaged in the investigation other than as a witness, if you will. And so after all this work was done, we reached the conclusion, we concluded our investigation and concluded that there was no basis for the allegation that was made, the allegation of inappropriate conduct. Not only had we not found evidence, we had actually talked to the two individuals who were engaged, and both of them told us the same thing, that it did not happen. So we, like I said, concluded our investigation, and that was the conclusion we reached.
Now, Rob, it's my understanding that after you finished that investigation, the results were actually reported to the WCA board. Can you tell us about that?
That's correct. Later in 2014, the WCA board was aware of this as well, so they asked us to come and share with them the investigation that we did. And so I recounted to the WCA board similarly what I just shared with you, answered their questions, because they were deciding whether or not to do their own investigation or to accept the investigation of the elder board.
Now, it's my understanding that there were 3 members of the WCA board that resigned, and Nancy Ortberg being one of those. Can you help us understand how Nancy was connected to this situation and about those resignations?
So Nancy was the person who had brought this matter to the WCA board, and so she was on the board at the time. And as I said, we presented the investigation that we had done as an elder board. The WCA board, now again, I'm not on the WCA board, but this is my understanding based on what they shared with me. The WCA board voted to accept the investigation of the elder board. Nancy personally disagreed with that, and I believe that the other two individuals might have disagreed with that as well. I did not talk to them about the reasons for the resignation, but within a few months after that decision, three people resigned from the board, one of them being Nancy.
So with those people, those three people resigning, Pam, can you speak to the elders, and have any of them resigned throughout the process of this investigation?
Yeah, so during, it's a 4-year process. As I'm sure you're aware, we have term limits. We have 4-year term limits, and so each year we had 2 or 3 elders that would cycle off, and new elders that would cycle on, that we would need to bring up to speed with where we're at on all of our matters, this one including. And over the course of those 4 years, we've not had one elder resign from the board over this matter.
But during that time, it's my understanding that with Jimmy and Leanne, they had brought in John and Nancy Ortberg, and those two couples began working together and were trying to figure out how to help move this issue forward. That takes us on to our next movement, which started in February 2015. On there from February to June 2016. Pam, can you tell us what happened in that time frame?
Sure. What we learned during that time frame was that the Ortbergs and the Miatos had reached out to Dr. B to ask for his help in pursuing this matter. And I think it's important for you to know what Dr. B's response to them was. He said the biblical injunction is to not charge an offense against anyone, especially a church leader, unless the charge is supported by 2 or 3 witnesses. And that's out of 1 Timothy 5:19. So he had alerted us to the fact that they had reached out to him at that time.
So then that takes us on to July 2016. Can you tell us what happened in that time?
Sure. Just so you know, I'm nervous. I'm not usually up on the stage. I usually do my work behind the scenes as an elder, so hopefully I'll do okay relaying the story for you. In June of 2016, Rob cycled off the board and was no longer the chair of the elder board. So I stepped in as the chair at that time, and shortly thereafter received an email from the Ortbergs and the Miatos, and also Nancy Beach and Benny Schmidt, requesting a meeting, requesting some time to sit down with the elders to discuss their concerns around our previous investigation, our internal investigation that we did, and then to discuss some additional concerns that they had. So we obliged them to do that. We had 5 elders meet with the 6 of them, and we spent several hours listening to their concerns about the investigation that we did, and then listening to some additional concerns that they had. Let me just walk you through those. The first one, Nancy Ortberg brought a concern that she had about something she'd heard about a woman being on Bill's boat. Did you want to?
Yeah, this was something that got blown way out of proportion. I am very glad to speak to this now. Most of you know I love boats, I love boating. And so it's not uncommon for our family to have 8 or 10 people go out for a boat ride over in Michigan, watch a sunrise, sunset, or whatever. Sunset, no sunrises. But anyway, so one evening, a family friend joined us and a whole bunch of other sailors from South Haven. Beautiful boat ride late at night. And when we came back into the slip, everybody got off the boat, and as is my custom, the way I unwind after boating like that, I go down below, I ask the family, all the guests to leave, and so I close the door, I put on worship music, and then I do the dishes and clean up the boat. It's just something, I hate to do that at home, like in the kitchen, but on a boat, it extends my boating experience, so, all right. So anyway, I'm down doing the dishes, and I hear a splash. And it's late at night, and I go, oh my gosh, this is not good. We've had a couple of occasions in South Haven where people have been inebriated, and they fell off a dock and drowned. So I was very attuned to the fact this was late at night, there's water involved. When I jumped up into the cockpit area of the boat, I looked, I saw someone was swimming in the river. And I yelled out and I said, who are you? What in the world are you doing? And then I recognized that it was someone who had been on the boat prior that night, who had come back without my knowledge and jumped in the water. And I said, this is very dangerous. You're where boats come in and out here. You got to get out of the water right now. She said, well, that's going to be difficult because I don't have clothes on. I was furious. I said, you're in a dangerous situation, and now you've put me in a terrible situation. Get out of the water. No, not yet. I ran down below and got a whole bunch of towels, put them on the swim platform. I closed the door. I said, you get out, you go home. And I was absolutely stunned that someone would do that. And later she apologized and she said, it was a stupid thing to do. I said, I agree with you 100%. That was a stupid thing to do from a safety standpoint and from an appearance standpoint of the situation you potentially could have put me in there. And she again apologized profusely for that. And that's what I reported to the elders. It was told it came to the elders in a far more exaggerated version, as though she had done this while I was on the boat or while people were around and all this. It was exactly the way I told it. I didn't know she had come back. I didn't know who was in the water when she told me this. I said, there's towels. That's it. Done. So that's the truth, gang.
The other concerns that they brought to the board, Nancy Beach shared a story about a trip, which you read in the paper. What we heard that day was a much shorter version of that account in the newspaper. Leanne represented and shared again with us the initial allegation that was brought that Rob explained to you. And then Betty Schmidt, who is a longtime elder, I'm sure many of you know her. I asked her when she was there, I said, Betty, have you ever had any red flags like this come up for Bill in your 30-year tenure? To which she replied, no, not an inkling. And then she remembered, she said, oh, but there was this one time where a woman kissed Bill, and I said, I asked her what she did with that. How did Bill respond when she asked Bill about it? And she said, I don't remember her name, and we never talked to Bill about it. So at that time, we didn't have a name. Betty could remember, and that was the length of the story that we had there. They then told us that they wanted us to conduct a gold star or a gold standard investigation. And so after this very long meeting, again, there was just 5 elders there, and we, as Rob has already told you, we make decisions as a body. So the 5 of us took it back to the full board, relayed all of the information, and after a lot of prayer and consideration, we decided to hire an external investigator, someone completely independent from Willow, to help us look into these matters.
So then that takes us on to September of 2016, when actually you began looking for who that investigator would be. Can you tell us about that process and what happened in that season?
Sure. Once we made the decision to hire an outside external investigator, we determined that the criteria that we were looking for was we wanted someone with legal expertise in employment law in this area, because these were employees that we were talking about. And we wanted someone who had experience, who was a Christ follower, who understood the church and understood the Christian community. And we wanted someone who was completely independent with Willow. Someone that had no ties to Willow, was not a member. We had never worked with them before. That was very important to us as well. So once we determined those criteria, we then interviewed 3 different potential law firms, and we landed on Jeffrey Fowler because of his qualifications. He was a partner, or he is a partner, in a prominent law firm called Willow Wheaton in Chicago. He has expertise in employment law. He has expertise in conducting employment-related corporate investigations. And he was a Christ follower. When we talked to him, you could tell his heart was turned toward Christ. So those three things led us to choose him as the external investigator that we were going to engage in this matter.
Can I ask a question about that? Sure. Something that just kind of came in is, you use the phrase gold star investigation. What is a gold standard? What is a gold standard investigation? And then how is it different than the investigation we chose to do?
That was a little puzzling to us. We weren't quite sure. That was a term that they used often with us, a gold standard investigation. And quite frankly, I can't speak to that. What I can say is when we get to the point of a little bit later on, I think I'll be able to give some clarity on what they consider to be a gold standard investigation.
So it's my understanding that once the investigator was chosen, that Jeff invited that group of 6 to participate in the investigation, but they declined. Can you give an explanation for why?
Sure, absolutely. Jeff did. The first thing that he did was, because these individuals were the ones who brought the concerns to us, they were the first names that he reached out to and invited to be a part of the process. After not hearing from them for, I don't remember, a few weeks, maybe a couple days, they reached back out through legal counsel that they had engaged, and they gave us a set of demands or criteria by which we needed to abide if they would participate in our investigation, or in Jeff's investigation. And these were in the statement, but I'll read them again if you didn't read that. Their criteria were that these couples, the Mianos and the Ortbergs, would approve the choice of the investigator, that the investigation would run the full course of Bill's adulthood from age 18 ongoing, that they would be able to choose the witnesses who were interviewed, and all people interviewed would have full indemnification. Which, I don't know if you know what that means, but that means that basically you can say anything and not be held accountable for it. There would be no legal ramifications for what you said. The investigation reports would all be public, regardless of what the outcome of the investigation was. And these couples insisted that there would be a public admission of anything that they, not the investigator and not we as elders, deemed inappropriate. So we came to the conclusion as a full elder board and that those criteria, that those demands just were not biblical, and that we could not abide by them.
And that is actually in this story. I know many of us are trying to come to why and how did this come together. This point right here is a very important part of the story to understand where things started to break apart, where it became a question of would these demands be met, and would the control of this investigation be given to these people outside of the church, or would it be to the outside investigator working with our elders? And that is a key point when you come back through this whole story, where you see a fracture of tension and relationship starting to occur. But Pam, you moved forward with doing so, even though the 2 couples and the others decided they would not participate, you moved forward still with the investigation. Can you tell us what all was involved in that?
Yeah, Heather, before I do that, one thing I forgot to mention, I think in the sadness of all of this is, as Heather mentioned, the fracture in relationship. And so prior to this point, a little bit earlier, I had been in pretty constant conversation with Jimmy and Leanne, trying to work through how could we come to, how could we find a common path forward. And then when they engaged a counselor or an investigator, when they engaged a lawyer and we engaged with Jeff, that's when that communication halted. I just think that's important for you to know. So let me tell you about the investigation and what it entailed. Jeff completed 29 interviews of staff members, former staff members, people that traveled with Bill, people that knew him well, a wide variety of individuals. He examined church financial records. He examined Bill's personal financial records. He examined phone records. He engaged an IT forensic firm once again to look at our server and to look for emails there. And he examined Bill's calendar and travel schedule as well.
It's very helpful as you go through that list of each of those that were there. Pam, can you help us to understand a little bit in the midst of that? We've got the question we keep getting over and over that I just want to pause to address now is, why did the church not know about this in the midst of this investigation? And I just thought we're going to address that question now because, wow, a lot of you are sending that in. So why did the church not know? And yeah, I think it's good for you, but Bill, it would also be good for you to speak into that as well. But why didn't the church know that these investigations were going on?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think the honest answer is that when we were doing the investigation, particularly when Jeff was doing it, he was interviewing people, and they were promised confidentiality so that they could respond honestly. And so we wanted to protect, their confidentiality in this. But I think too, it's a sensitive matter, and we had concluded in the first investigation that there was nothing, that we found no evidence to support the allegation that was brought forward. And so to bring that to full light, or to bring that to the congregation, just did not seem appropriate at the time.
So tell us now, you've done that full investigation, then how did that wrap up? How did that conclude?
Yep. So that takes us from, let me just look at the dates there. He started the investigation in November, and in April of 2017, he concluded the investigation, which found no evidence of any misconduct on Bill's part.
Now, one question was asked about, even now today, why have those reports not been made public?
Yeah, and I go back to what I said earlier. Jeff interviewed 29 individuals. There are a lot of names that are in these reports, and even trying to redact the names and take them out would make it very difficult to read. And even with redacting the names, the stories would reveal some of those individuals that we had promised confidentiality to. So making those reports available to the public was very difficult. The full elder board, of course, had access and had read through all of those, but it wasn't something that we felt like we could make available to the full public.
And then towards the end of that investigation, you heard back from that group of 6 in an email on April 19th. Can you tell us the contents of that email?
I can. We received an email through their lawyer stating that they would not participate, and that they, restating that they weren't going to participate, and that they were going to leave the matter in the hands of the elders. I'd like to just read the last paragraph of that letter, if you don't mind. At this point in time, my clients do not feel it would be productive to engage further in your process. With heavy hearts, they have no choice but to walk away from 3 futile years of employing Willow to do the right thing by placing the search for truth over the work and reputations of ministry and individuals. Though they walk away from this particular process, they do so with continued hope in a God who is always at work, sanctifying and healing his people in truth and love.
I want to jump back earlier in the investigation, and the Tribune kind of brought this up about 1,150 unreadable emails. Can one of you speak to that? Why was there so many emails? Why were they unreadable? What's the backstory on that? A lot of emails came in about that.
So and Bill could probably address this a bit as well, but the email retention policy of Willow with respect to Bill's emails, as you might expect, a number of them have to do with pastoral concerns or the coaching or the counseling or the mentoring he's doing of leaders across the world. They do not retain those emails. So we're able to see that emails had been sent, but we're not able to obtain the contents. So we're not able to obtain on the Willow system. As I mentioned, we also look for on his devices, and they just were not retained.
And Rob, within that,
I'd like to speak into that too, because this got some coverage. as many of you know, because you have had very confidential interactions with me, the job of a pastor gets very complicated. And because I'm not just a pastor to this church, but because of my work with the Willow Creek Association, I'm in touch with thousands of pastors, literally, and a lot of leaders around the world who tie into our Global Leadership Summit. And I didn't ask for this to start happening, but a lot of people wanted to contact me about very private issues. Business people who are going to get investigated, or athletes who are going to get ratted out on a drug test, or some very, very confidential kinds of things. Well, I handled them with our regular email system for a long time, and then I got hacked. And then I got hacked by a former employee, and all of a sudden I realized I've got all these emails, and 100 lives could explode if those emails are made public. You have no idea the level of information and parents whose children are coming out gay, and people who are considering self-harm. And so, when I got hacked, I was just like, that's it. I either have to go off email altogether, or I have to find a way that when I delete an email, that it doesn't lie around for someone to go phishing or hacking in it after that. So we brought it up to a new level of security, and then some years later, I got hacked a second time. And I was like, that's it. So our email, or our IT people who do things I don't even understand. I'm so proud of myself that I can email, I can't text, and I rarely use the phone, by the way. So sometimes people are asking, about my email traffic. I don't like talking on the phone. I don't text, so email is everything. But those, I wanted that level of security so people could confide in me without worrying about confidentiality.
One of the things to note too is Bill uses email like text. If you've ever received an email from him that's not on Friday at noon, you know that it's like just 2 words. You good? Great. Praying. Go get him. Thanks. Keep going. You good? Yes. Good. Thank you. So right there, like I can show you there's like 15 emails with 30-second words. So that is one. Yeah. So
I think we should pull up how many emails you've received in the past few years.
Let me ask you another.
Can I just real quick on that email piece? The other aspect that was not made clear, and I know Pam, you had clarified this at one point, in that 2 things. While the emails were not retrievable, even though Bill had a higher level of security, even a normal staff member at Willow, those emails would not have been retrievable just because of the normal deletion time that any corporation or organization have. Emails delete, and the one thing that the forensic firm was able to find is that these emails weren't physically deleted. These emails naturally went off of the system as the other emails. So no one went in and deleted them. They went off. Is that accurate? Did I miss anything there?
He confirmed, the way that it read in the reports, that he confirmed that all deletion of emails were on the regularly scheduled deletion times. So there was nothing unusual about that.
Now, in the forensic search, they were actually able to find some that were somehow floating out there in the system. Were those read, and what were the contents of those emails?
Yeah, we were 4 emails were found, and they were innocuous. I mean, there was no evidence of anything inappropriate. They were much like the emails Steve just explained.
Bill, I want to also talk about, and this came in a ton so far with the questions, but you've always preached Matthew 18, and we just got to the point where this, investigation kind of ended. Why didn't you ever just go and fly out there, sit down with them and say, help me understand? And it's something you've taught us. What was behind that?
Well, I think we should pull up how many emails you have received in the past few years. You know that you have, so far as the questions. But you've always preached Matthew 18, and we just got to the point where this, investigation kind of ended. Why didn't you ever just go and fly out there, sit down with them and say, help me understand?
Well, I think Pam said it well, and Heather mentioned it too. Once you get lawyers involved, then the lawyer comes in your office, as he came in my office, and he said, we're doing an investigation. Do not have any conversations with any of these people. We were in and out of investigations for almost 3 years. So I wasn't able to have normal conversations like I preach you ought to be able to have. And so that was extremely frustrating to me, because I could feel the separation growing and growing and growing, but I wasn't allowed to have any bridge building conversations because of these ongoing investigations.
Okay, so that then takes us up to May of 2017. Pam, do you want to talk to us about this next season?
Sure. We began to hear stories of current and former staff members that were being contacted by these individuals, asking if they had had any unusual interactions with Bill.
And that was specifically females specifically being contacted and questioned. Has Bill ever made you uncomfortable? Has Bill ever made comments about your clothing? Have you ever been in a situation that you believe was questionable about Bill? And there were many of our female staff, former and present, who were contacted by these people and really interrogated with those questions.
Yeah, and then in December of 2017, I received word that there was an individual who had some concerns and wanted to talk to the elder board about them. So I reached out to her. We got together and we spent a good time, a good long time together, just listening to what her concerns were. Now again, we make decisions as a full elder board, so I took this back to the elder board, and we decided that since Jeffrey Fowler had been engaged in this with us before, we had worked with him, we had trusted him, that he could step in and quickly we could conduct this investigation. So he did, and the concerns that she brought forward included what you read about, an invitation to a hotel room. Bill made an invitation, she alleged, to his hotel room. There was some allegation or concern on her part that there might be some intimidation going on to get her to remain silent. And then multiple comments on clothing. And so he conducted his investigation. We started that investigation on January 8th, and on February 15th, he concluded his investigation. There was objective evidence, email evidence, video footage, to not only refute the allegations, but there was one allegation, the allegation with the hotel room, where we were able to recover emails that not only refuted, but showed actually the opposite had taken place. And I'd like to read you that email exchange now, if that's okay. So this individual was asking about, they were at a conference, and this individual was asking about, this woman was asking about if she could bring another pastor to the meeting the next day. Bill said he is welcome to sit in on anything, but he should not pass out business cards. This woman said, this is not business cards, but I have fantastic wine and unbelievably talented friends if you're interested in either. No pressure, you get it. Bill said, given my state of tiredness, I would not be great company. Is tomorrow at the break a better option for a quick connect? The woman said, sure thing. Seriously, feel no pressure. I know you have a lot of expectations. Looking forward to potentially connecting tomorrow. P.S. Have a glass ready if you change your mind. After a few series of email exchanges about meetings the next day, it picks up here. The woman says, praying you can sleep. No, that's a challenge. If you can't, still have a glass. And riveting conversation to bore you to sleep. She then emails again. So bedtime is now, ? Or wine time is now. And then she types delete. The next email she writes, one glass, and then writes delete again. Bill says, is a phone chat
not enough? Is a phone chat close enough? Room 835. The woman replies, don't want to take up your time with a call, but wine delivery, no pressure. Bill replies, does a call not work on your end? And the woman replies, sure thing, it does, anytime, and gives her phone number. The exchange shows clearly and objectively, as is stated in the report, that it was this woman who was pushing to visit Bill's suite and not Bill inviting her to come to his suite.
This was difficult, gang, because this got reported in another kind of fashion. This was a former staff member. I had seen potential in her. Both Heather and I did leadership development for her because we thought she had a great future here. And then she moved out of the area. But I was curious that week when I was teaching pastors, why is she trying so hard to find or to spend time with me? Because she had already moved out of the area and all this. I don't know. I remember clearly thinking, nobody calls my room late at night and asks to come up like this. So I initially thought she had an emergency of some sort, that something urgent, which is why I said, if it's urgent, I'll do a phone call maybe. She didn't want a phone call. She wanted to come up to the room for reasons I don't understand, because I had no close friendship with her. It's not like we were buddies. So that's when I just finally said, nope, not tonight. I'll see you in the lobby tomorrow morning before I head out for a flight. But again, this was kind of reported in a different kind of fashion before. I want to say one more thing, because it said in one of these reports that I had commented on her fashion and made clothing comments. So I had given her 2 promotions around the church here. And one of them was a sizable promotion, and the night I introduced her to the new ministry that she was leading, or going to be leading, she had like a tie-dye t-shirt on and some very casual jeans, and it was in front of an important ministry audience. And afterwards I said to this person, you know, we just read a book as a staff called The Intangibles of Leadership. And one of the chapters says that fashion matters in leadership, that you need to dress professionally if you're being promoted in a professional organization. And so I drew her attention to that, and I said, look, I don't have real specific ideas in mind of how you should dress, but I just think you ought to match the kind of fashion and attire of the people that you're leading now. And she took that very well. She's like, thanks. Okay, that's good. When she began to talk to Pam, she exaggerated that and said that not only did I talk to her a lot about her clothing, but I talked to her in ways about her clothing that made her feel uncomfortable. Patently not true. And it really bothered me to hear that false accusation. And I thought, what kind of day are we living in now? So I just want all of you women to know, I will never comment on anything you wear. You can show up with a burlap bag. I am never, ever going to make a fashion comment, because this was hard for me. It was hard for me that she alluded to the fact that I was trying to get her up to my hotel room, flat out lie. And this fashion stuff, absolute lie. It just bothered me so much, this last whole allegation. Jeff finished his investigation of this whole situation and said there isn't a shred of evidence to support any misconduct on my part. So I was like, finally. So this is the end of the 3rd time that I've been investigated for this kind of stuff. And all 3 times it came back, there is no evidence of misconduct of any kind. Now, I do want to speak to the situation with Nancy Beach. I have enormous respect for Nancy Beach. we were like partners. We were sidekicks with each other for like 30 years. And I officiated at her wedding, and we've been family friends. She mentored my daughter, Shauna, and so this is really great. And when she decided to leave Willow, she wanted to teach a little more than we had capacity for her to be able to teach. When she left Willow, I was heartbroken. I was hoping that she would be kind of one of these, lifetime kinds of friends. And then she kind of went her own way. I thought we parted on decent enough terms. Never knew that there was a bad thought in her head or whatever. And then I read that 19 years ago, I made a comment about her arms. I don't know why that subject matter came up at the dinner we were having over in Spain. I suspect it was because women around Willow, and if you were here in the day, Nancy wore outfits that showed toned arms. Can I say it like that? Like Michelle Obama. Same kind of thing, right? And I don't know how the subject came up, but I just said, I think a lot of women would certainly appreciate having arms like you have, because you work out and they're toned and all that. And the Chicago Tribune reported this in such a way that it made it sound sexualized. Maddening to me. And then she said there was an awkward hug. And you know my hug policy? I don't hug him. And that was very hurtful to me. I was like, and I want to say this in all seriousness. If in fact my comments or my actions that night, 19 years ago or whatever it was, if it actually did cause her concern, I wish 100 times that she would have just said, hey, red flag, don't talk about my arms, red flag, terrible hug or whatever. We were close enough that she could have talked to me. We talked about everything. Part of the reason I like Nancy is she was a strong leader. If I was in a meeting and said, let's go this way, she'd say, Bill, that's dumb. She was not afraid. She had strong opinions. She would controvert my thoughts and strategies on a regular basis. And I like to be around strong women. And I'm proud of the culture we have here at Willow, where people can just say, excuse me, that joke in a mixed setting, let's not do that. And then the whole culture just goes, oh, hey, good idea. Hey, you're talking too much about this or that. Note to self, let's not do that anymore. We have a self-correcting culture because we have men and women working together in very close teams. So we teach our staff to say, if you're ever uncomfortable, just raise the flag and say, hey, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable now. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that because it's your boss, well, we have a hotline, we have an HR director, we have elders who will listen to any concern. None of this was mentioned for 19 years. And then it shows up in the Tribune as though this is a pattern in my life. It's not a pattern in my life, gang. It was portrayed to be a pattern for reasons I don't understand. But I still have enormous respect and affection for Nancy Beach. I have respect for all of the people engaged in this. But these kinds of accusations and allegations strain relationships, if you can understand what I mean.
Hey Bill, one of the things that also came up in the Tribune was an international trip that you and Nancy happened to be on. Can you talk about why you guys were in Spain and a little bit about the dinner and the walking?
So we have a partner church in Malaga, Spain. In fact, Nancy and her husband Warren were generous to the building of that church. I had visited them several times because the church, after it built its beautiful building, had a leadership struggle, and so I had to go do conflict resolution there from time to time. I was coming from Switzerland. I don't know what country Nancy was coming from. She was coming from another country. We were both headed to Germany to do a major summit there for about 4,000 or 5,000 leaders. So because I was coming from one part of the world, she was coming from another, and because we were heading into this huge conference in Germany a couple days after that, I said, why don't we regroup in Spain? I'll visit the church I need to counsel with, and we can finally sit down and do the programmatical planning that we need to do to be ready for the conference in Germany. And she said, great. So I was visiting that church, and then we did some programmatical planning for the Germany conference, but after a long day of work, there's just two of us there, not in the same room, obviously, and we sat at a dinner in an outside cafe a block from the hotel. So we were friends, gang. There was nothing unusual about a dinner out in the open at a reasonable time of the evening. So again, that's been portrayed as something more than that. It was not more than that. It never was.
So, Bill, I would like to go back to the most recent investigation. So, Pam had read the emails that showed that while this woman brought the allegation that Bill had invited her up to, that he had invited her up to his hotel room, the emails actually showed the exact opposite, that 6 times in that exchange, she asked to come up to his hotel room. But
let's also straighten something out. When I'm doing travel and in conference settings, the particular hotel that we're talking about right here, I think we sold out the entire hotel. It's not uncommon if you get